Hi everyone, it's Stuart and Feargal here. We're on Leaders, I guess, part 2. So for those that didn't tune into part 1, so this is sort of following my transition from Leinster into Racing and the leadership challenges associated with that. Feargal is an expert in this field, having led many teams and obviously a rugby nut as well. So he's the perfect person to ask good questions. So yeah, since we last spoke, there's a bit going on, which we'll dive into. A couple of pre-season games, and now we are 3 days away from the first league game. And when we reach part 3 in maybe a month or so's time, those 3 league games will be done, and the World Cup will be starting. So there'll be even more to talk about then. But Feargal's going to fire away some questions, and I'll do my best to sort of give some insight into how it's all going.
Oh, so Sava, Stuart.
Sava, Feargal, yeah. Sava.
I suppose that leads me into the first one. How's the French coming along?
I'm learning more words. I'm definitely learning more words. Stringing them together into coherent sentences is still a challenge. I think the players are very I'm probably more frustrated with myself than anyone else. I think a lot of the management team speak good English, and they'll sort of coach me along and try and teach me French at the same time, which is really good actually. And the players, you've got quite a few English speaking anyway. Of the French lads, most of them speak English, but so I think they prefer I speak in English rather than broken French, and then it gets translated. But yeah, I think I'm on 5 weeks in, so I'm definitely understanding a lot more of the conversations, but I'm still a long way from holding meetings in French, and the actual coaching actually is a bit easier than the presentation or the meetings, because the rugby terminology is relatively the same, and when you're shouting, you're shouting.
And I suspect you're a bit harder on yourself than the external environment, because you want to be the best coach you can be, and you feel you need to do it in the native language. But I think you've got 7 or 8 different nationalities there in the team, and most French people have better English than we would have French. So, by the sounds of it, you're getting there.
Yeah, I've certainly learned that, because that was the sort of image in my mind. I was trying to think, if a French head coach came into Leinster, for example, how would it be received? What would it be like in the meetings, speaking French all the time? But you're right. I think the French are very used to watching English films or listening to English being spoken. So they've definitely picked up a lot more. But I'm more frustrated myself, because I can't have the one-to-one conversations that you'd normally have as a coach. So for example, the game finishes and you give your sort of piece at the end of the game, summary of the game, and then normally you'd sort of sit down with 1 or 2 players and get their thoughts on the game. And I want to obviously do it with different players and ideally not just the English-speaking players. So half-time in the first pre-season game at Perpignan, we came down and Freddie Michalak was chatting to the backs, and the backs were chatting back to him, obviously in French. And I'm sort of sat there looking for Joe Rourke as if to say, Joe, just come and translate. So yeah, just things like the physio or the doctor giving you a message to say someone's injured, or little things like that in the game or around the game that you'd think would be second nature, but obviously very different.
Yeah, and I mean, you are in an unprecedented position, because I think of the other non-French coaches, you've got Ronan O'Gara, head coach in La Rochelle, but who spent a lot of time learning from the bottom when he was at the Racing and working his way up. And then you have Richard Cockrell in Montpellier, but I think he played there and also worked his way through the coaching system. Yeah. So to be parachuted in as a non-native speaker, the head coach, is unprecedented in France, I'd suggest.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But again, I think like they're very patient with me, and I think I was speaking to coaches about it today. Actually, they were saying, because I'm speaking English and they understand language, they're having to concentrate to what I'm saying, and it forces me to say less. And obviously, because you've got the translation that will follow my 2 sentences, for example. But a lot of it also is images. So I'm showing clips of games. I'm showing examples of good breakdown, good defense, bad defense. Good attack, bad attack. Review of our training, review of games, etc. So it's definitely achievable. It's definitely achievable. But I think to do it to the best of your ability, ideally you'd be fluent. But I think that comes with time. There's been more than half a dozen people say the same thing who are English speaking, who've come into France, and within 6 to 12 months, they're not far off. And I think I'll hopefully be in that category.
Super. Now, I know today was media day. How did it go? and what are your general impressions of the top 14 compared to what you might have thought, 6 months ago?
Yeah, well, I think top 14's got a huge profile in France, and obviously the season kicks off this weekend. So without the World Cup having started, it's generating. L'Équipe obviously is the big sort of sports paper. It's generating stories within L'Équipe now, which is good for the profile of the game. Particularly in these 3 games. So there's a 3-game block before the World Cup starts. Then the World Cup will dominate, obviously. The World Cup will finish, and then top 14 will then start, and then Europe. So I think it's been good for the league to start this early, to get a foot in the door from a profile point of view. So as a consequence, I've had 3 different interviews today. 1 Canal Plus for the TV show, 1 for L'Équipe, and 1 for the sort of news agency that spreads it out to everyone. So they're all asking similar type questions. Why leave Leinster? Why come to Racing? What's your relationship going to be like with the president, Laurent Travers? How have you found the first few weeks? What's it like living in France? Where do you see the challenges? What are the opportunities? So again, fortunately, they're all in English. And apparently on Channel Plus, for example, they'll put subtitles to my answers. But yeah, it's good. I mean, and obviously the top 14 itself, it's just a big profile. Like in England, for example, you've got 92 soccer teams who've just started, premierships just started, etc., etc. And that takes up a huge amount of, media and advertising and everything else. Whereas in top 14, it's high profile. So we've got Bordeaux this weekend, and then we've got Pau away, and then we've got Perpignan at home. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in terms of I think every game's televised. We're 2:00 Saturday. A lot of Paris is on holiday at the moment. So I think for those that know Paris, it generally tends to shut down literally for the month of August.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what the attendance is like. But there's been a few Racing fans at the away games. So we've played Brive away and Perpignan away. One thing obviously that struck me is the size of the country. Whilst, the population is not dissimilar to the UK. We played Brive, and we set up on Thursday about 2:00. I think we got there at at 1:00 we set up. We got there about 6:30, 7:00. The game finished at 11, and we got back at 6 a.m. And we lost.
No private jets. No private.
Well, it wasn't not for that game, and obviously some of the airports, some of the places are quite small towns, but they're very strong identities. These places that we're playing, they're all centered around a community, and rugby is a big focal part, particularly in the southwest of the country.
Yeah. Just to finish up on the media, there's a perception maybe that in the UK the media is maybe influenced by the football, the soccer kind of overlap. In Ireland, they're probably a bit more benign. Your sense of the French media, are they?
Yeah, I had a really interesting chat with the pre and post interview chat with the journalist from L'Équipe today, and he said they're generally looking for a good, not a good news story, but a good story. They want to tell. They're given ample space within the newspaper. Canal Plus do a proper rugby show. So there's plenty of space to talk about things that, rather than just the sensational things, the human interest piece. So a lot of the L'Équipe interview today was about family and all the things that we would talk about. So hopefully it comes across well on whenever they decide to publish it. But no, I found the journalists so far to be very, very fair and very welcoming.
You mentioned the personal bit. You're settled now. Your wife is over. Have you more sense of being anchored now in Paris?
Yeah. No, that was a bit of a flying visit back to Leeds. So I flew back to Leeds, jumped in the car with Nina and the 2 dogs, drove down to the tunnel, and then got to Calais, and then drove across to Paris and got here. So it was a day-long operation with regimented stop for dogs. But we made it. The dogs are a bit bewildered to start with, as if we don't recognise this evening walk. And why is everyone speaking funny to me? No, they've settled in well. Nina's enjoyed it. She had some friends over, which I think is good for her, to help her settle in. My sons came across last weekend, so Daniel came over, and Sophie's coming across for the game this weekend. So that's good. It's still obviously, like, living in France is very different to Ireland and England for sure. Like, as I think I said last time, but the evenings are very much centered around eating late, socializing at home, whereas in Ireland or England, generally you'd eat earlier and you maybe socialize. You got the pub watching football or rugby or whatever's on, so that's very different. We have been into Paris twice. Went to Saint-Germain, which is a lovely sort of part. In fact, we went in last Saturday and watched the England-Wales game and the France-Scotland game, which is a good experience to sit in a French environment watching the game. So that's been good. But generally, it's been like get up in the morning early, get to work early. There's a lot to do, Feargal, as you can imagine. So it's not a huge amount of exploring at the moment for me, but it's good for Nina to have her friends coming over and then they can explore together and then educate me.
And briefly talk to people about the geography of Paris, Stuart, because people think Racing, middle of Paris, but actually it's more the suburbs.
Yeah, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize this actually. So imagine, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower is the center of Paris, and there's a big circle around it. Where I live, it's like 7 or 8 o'clock on the clock, so it's southwest.
Yeah.
And we're in the suburbs, a place called Plessis Robinson, or between Plessis Robinson and Sceaux, which is where the training ground is. And then the Défense Arena is sort of up at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So it's quite a commute from the training ground to the Défense Arena. And the 92 of Paris, Racing, represents the 92 councils within the suburb of Paris. So Paris actually, if you like, is Stade Francais, and Racing 92 represents the suburbs or the outskirts of the Parisian environment, which I didn't really realize. I understood the history, and there was a great book on the history of Racing that I've read, because Racing was formed in 1882. And there's a great film that I've seen now on which chronologically is the history of the club. But this sense of identity, where in Leinster, for example, it's very, you represent the province of Leinster, but it comes around Dublin really, and everything's quite close together. It's very different here. I think there's a lot of cultural diversity, I'd say, in the club. So within the French players, but also within the different nationalities that exist. And I can't help but feel like we could definitely do some good work on building on the history of the club and what actually the history of Racing is all about, and the stories of the former players and the way they played and the trophies they won. But I think with those sorts of things, you need to play well first as well. So we need to play well. Yeah. So I could get wrapped up into all that quite easily because I love all that sort of stuff. But there's only so many hours in the day, and the priority has to be coach well, play well, and then really try and build that sort of sense of identity and supporter base that I think is essential for home field advantage to count, because it counts when you go to Toulouse, it counts when you go to Toulon, it counts when you go to Perpignan. Anyway.
It's interesting there, and we can go back to it another day, but that difference between the brand, the external perception, and the identity, which really forms the internal core of the club, there does seem to be a disconnect. The brand seems a lot bigger than the identity, based on what I've read and heard about the club.
I'd say the brand is definitely obviously a big brand, and rightly so when you look at the history of the club. I think definitely there is some work to be done in that sense. To give you an example, like the film I've seen on the history of Racing, one of the players who'd been there 6 or 7 years, I said, "Oh, have you seen this?" And he said, "Oh, no, I've not seen it." So it's a simple win I can create by getting the players. Listen, let me watch this. It's 20 minutes. And if you're, I don't know, Sia Khaleesi coming to join Racing, I think he'd find it really interesting. But he would find it just Will Rowlands. The new players coming in from the outside who are at the World Cup now. So I think there's a way in which you can tie everything together. We've got a camp coming up. So we've got these 3 league games. Then we've got a camp in Spain in the block between round 3 and round 4. I'm going to use that camp as a training camp, but also a chance to talk about how you really build a deep-rooted sense of purpose and identity, and values and behaviors and all those things. So we have a leadership group, but we're very much leading on day-to-day stuff at the moment, right? How was last week? How was this week? Any feedback? Here's some things we're thinking about for next week. Because there's a lot of changes that I've made within the working week, within the way in which we train, the way in which we tackle, the way in which we defend, the way in which I announced the team earlier in the week. So there's a lot for the players to absorb purely on the rugby front, as opposed to anything else.
Well, that brings us nicely at the end of the first version of this that we did a month ago. I asked you what would success look like after a month. And you mentioned 3 things: that the new changes had been positively adopted and got a positive response. Your change around, say, the layout of the gym, the office, the meetings, how you operate. That there's a real focus on quality of performance and people taking that training performance then into the games. And the third thing, that you would communicate effectively your coaching vision and philosophy in English to the team and the club. Give me feedback on how you feel you've met those 3 objectives, as you said yourself.
Yeah, I'd say 1 and 3 have been. I'd give a good score out of 10. I think they've definitely adopted and been open-minded about the changes that we've made. And I think, they've been together with a previous coaching team for quite a long time. So it's not to criticize their style or anything. It's more to do with the fact that it's something different, some new ideas. Obviously, I've learned a lot from both Leinster and with England. So to try and bring some of those ideas, the challenge for me has been not to give them all in one go. But no, they've definitely been receptive to that. They've been receptive to the training. They've enjoyed the training, I think. And there's been a translation to a point in the preseason games of the training into games. In terms of the communication, I think, I'm asking for feedback from the existing coaches from last year, from the players from last year, from the new staff from this year. What do they think? Do they understand what I'm saying? Because I'm inviting everyone to the meetings. So if it's a team review of, I don't know, Perpignan or whatever, then the physios are there, the conditioners are there, the team managers there, everyone's there. The young players are there. And so one of the challenges I'm finding a little bit is in an English speaking club consistently, I'd always be able to check for understanding. So you'd be able to sort of either say, do you understand the point I'm making about this attack shape or whatever? Okay, tell me what you mean by that. Tell me what, explain to me.
Yeah. So
you're always checking for understanding, but it's harder to do that, I find, just because of the language barrier. So what I say to them is, I said, I'll ask them a question in English, it's translated into French, and I tell them to reply in French to the group, and then obviously it translated back into English for me. And to be fair, I'm not the only. There's a couple of players who don't have great French either, so it helps them. But that sort of checking for understanding piece is. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, that checking for understanding piece is important to me.
And I'm asking a rugby question here, and I'm asking a leadership question here, but culturally, do they give you that feedback? Because I remember one time you said in Leinster that there were too many soldiers and not enough officers, that you needed to create a kind of a leadership culture within the team. Culturally in France, are they open to giving you honest, direct feedback, or are they in the kind of tell me what to do mode and I'll do it? Yeah,
no, I'd say the more the latter. But then again, that was probably similar to what Leinster was like when we first started. But it took a couple of years for the likes of Gary Ringrose and Robbie and James Ryan and Tig and everyone to really find their voice, I think. And it's the same here. I get the sense that they're used to being told what to do and then go and do it, whereas I'm a bit more like, so what do you think, or what can we do here, and give me some feedback on this. But they're gradually getting used to it, the different style, and they're not averse to speaking in meetings. They're not averse to giving their opinion. So in that sense, they're very, very similar, I'd say. very similar. I would say that similar to Leinster, really, the younger players need to sort of step forward a bit. And there's probably and bear in mind, there's Gail Feargal, who's the captain of the team the majority of the time. There's Cameron Waukee, there's Feargal, some big leaders to come back into the team. There's a big leadership void at the moment, but it's been great for the young players to have that window to train, and also for other people to find their voice whilst the high-profile players, the international players, are away.
There's almost a contradiction though in rugby terms, because you associate players who are tell me what to do is they follow a game plan, and if the game plan goes astray, they're lost. Whereas in France, if the game plan goes astray, they throw the ball around.
They're brilliant.
Yeah. So it's almost a contradiction that.
I think that's the thing. I'm trying to give them a framework without tying them down rigidly. But equally, I think the days are gone of you just throw the ball from anywhere and you hope you're going to win, because defenses are too good, too well organised. It's very hard to construct that multi-phase rugby without sophisticated, coordinated attack. And you end up turning the ball over and conceding as many tries as you score. And probably part of Racing's challenge last year was they scored the most tries in the competition, but conceded the most. So, and trying to sort of change that defence mentality, or the mentality to defend and want to defend and transition from attack to defence, and not turn the back up. If we defend well, get the ball back, not to turn it straight back over again. So using training to generate those habits, and then showing them on video. Listen, this is an example. We've turned the ball over here, and everyone sort of immediately for 2 seconds switched off because we were like,
we lost the ball.
Yeah, and they're all sort of looking as if they're sorry, because that's just what they used to do it.
And which brings us nicely, you give yourself good marks on 1 and 3. On the second one, which was getting quality performances and training and getting the team then to kind of bring that onto the pitch. Talk to us about the first 2 games and how two played out.
Yeah, no, the first game was Perpignan, and it was 17-10 in the end. Now, Perpignan's traditionally a difficult place to go for us, I think. And albeit it's a pre-season game, but there's still 10,000 people there, so it's not bad for a pre-season game.
And it's an away win, which are
away win,
enough.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be honest, the 10 points came in the last 10 minutes when we did exactly what we've just discussed. We got control of possession, and then threw possession away. They gave it back to us, so we threw it away again, and then they scored type thing. So that was a bit frustrating, but generally a positive start. And I could see, not consistently, but enough examples in attacking defence of the things he'd worked on in training translated into the game. Against the team, now we played just a regular starting 15 with the bench, and they obviously had 35 players they wanted to rotate and off, so it was like an ever-changing team you were playing against. So that was a good start, and we picked a different team to play against, Brive, and that was again similar opposition in that that 35 players changed many times. Now, Brive have been relegated, so they're on the desire to get promoted back to the top 14, but still had plenty of good players. And as you know, Pro D2 is full-time anyway. So we went down there. It was boiling hot, but we were poor really. From the first minute onwards, couldn't really nail the line out. Timing was off, core skill was poor, etc., etc., etc. So that was obviously disappointing, because we'd felt after the first week we made good progress. So it's an interesting leadership challenge about half-time, because in my mind we split for units. I come together, give some messages, and out we go. But I was so frustrated with the quality, and not because I expected us to walk over Brive, just judging our own performance against what I know is good and what teams at this level should be capable of. So I sort of said to the coaches, listen, I'm going to go first this half-time. So I didn't rant and rave, but they definitely got my point of view that was nowhere near the good enough standard. And obviously that's the first time, raised my voice, but also challenged them and said, this has to be an awful lot better. Second half was better, but the damage was done really, and we lost the game. So the players were ultimately disappointed themselves, because they wanted to do well, So then it leaves you. So we get back at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning, and then you've got Saturday and Sunday to think about it, and you've got to present the review back on Monday morning. So what tone do you adopt how do you deal with it? How do you identify individual errors? Do you go after team? Do you go after let's ignore it and pretend it never happened? What's your strategy? So my strategy has always been to take on reviews, win, lose, or draw. So it's too easy to cop out, to hide behind that was just a bad day at the office. So I took it on. I'd spent a lot of time mulling it over in my mind on Saturday, and then I went to the office early on Sunday morning, like 7 a.m. Did a lot of work on my own just to really think through my messaging and how to provide the players with what was the problem to what was the solution, as in like how can we avoid this scenario happening again.
Now, did your coaching team input into that, or did you have the first cut?
No, I had the first cut. No, I had the first cut. Obviously, I during the course of the journey home or the Saturday or Sunday conversations with the coaches, you're trying to get their point of view and why the line-out didn't go as well as we'd hoped, or a certain play didn't work. So trying to get their point of view. Sometimes, and again, it's probably a little bit down to the language thing. If it was a Leinster situation, I'd have rang up some key players who know me inside out and said, "What do you actually think of this? What's your why do you think mentally we switched off, or we weren't mentally prepared for the environment that was there?" So I tried to cover all the bases of the lead up to the game, but obviously it didn't happen like that. So I went down the approach of reviewing the game within the chronological order as it happened, and I showed them. I talked about momentum in games and how error on error on error leads to problems, and how to strategies for changing momentum in games, or asking them questions. How would you change momentum in games? And I had an example from something we did with England back in Six Nations, and it was against France. And I showed them, it was a momentum graph. And I was coaching England at the time, and we started pretty made error, came back, had some good points, error. France in the meantime were sort of steadily making more positive actions than negative. And even though the gap on the score at halftime wasn't that big, the momentum graph was actually quite significant. And England, we closed the gap and almost won the game in the end, but the damage was done. So I think it helped them understanding how to arrest momentum if they get themselves in that position again. So it was definitely a good learning experience from that point of view. I think secondly, we talked about if we're not in our flow, if we're not playing, so sometimes it happens in rugby, your timing's off, or you're not nailing your set piece, or it's a wet ball, or it's raining, or the referee's refereeing a certain way, or the breakdown's a mess. We can still, I said, we still could have won the game. Still could have won the game if we'd have played maybe more pressure rugby, kick the corners, pressure them, they kick the ball out, get our driving maul going, etc., etc. So understanding that even though we want to play racing rugby all the time, we can't do it all the time necessarily, particularly if we're not in our flow. So again, that was a good learning point to have happened in a preseason game rather than a league game. That said, it leaves you nervous going into the first league game, because you're wondering where we are for this week now. So selection obviously was the other part to play this week, because the game was Friday, came back Saturday, in the office Sunday, really thinking it through, trying to put together the right clips and the right messages within the presentation, turning the page into the next week, picking the team, announcing the team on the same day, Monday.
Which is a change from what would have gone before. Yeah,
they'd have announced him a lot later in the week. So obviously you've got selection decisions to make, and then the conversation subsequently to say, you're playing, you're not playing, this is the reason why. So obviously selection for Bordeaux is reflecting more the Perpignan team than the Brive team. And, it's hard to disagree, because the team that played in the first game played a lot more of the standard. But yeah, so it leaves I'm sure every coach in the top 14 is thinking exactly the same thing this weekend as well. With so many players away, so many of your top class players away, like Toulouse are missing 20, I think. I'm sure they're thinking the same, like what actually will happen this weekend in terms of like the performance. So I think it'll be fascinating 3 games. Obviously for us, we want to win at home.
And And just how did the players respond? Did you have, some players kind of getting a bit inward and sullen? Did you some players banging on the door saying I should be playing? I mean, are you discerning the characters?
Not really. No, I tried to pick up the key players, but also I've got assistant coaches who can obviously pick up players as well. So we tried to, and at the end of the day, it was a pre-season game. There's still 26 league games to go plus Europe.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be short of games to give people opportunities. But if you get an opportunity, you have to take your opportunity as well. That's part of the deal. So I can set frameworks and coach them on attack and defence, but part of being a top end rugby player is delivering within those. And the players understand that. They're not naive enough to think that they automatically should be picked just because of, I don't know, whatever their reputation. They know they have to play well.
Coming back to that building of team spirit, both in the management side and in the playing side, you mentioned before that you had a few ideas about, building it. And one of the things we discussed was, getting players and staff members to talk about themselves to help build that bond. Can you just give, and I think you led off yourself, just give the background of that.
Yeah. So I got them, played my song, and then...
Which was?
Country Roads.
Take Me Home.
Yeah. So obviously from the country myself, but big Leinster song in the last year. So it reminds me of Leinster as well. So, and then showed my story, my family, my background, my career to date, the highs and the lows. Anyway, so from then on, every staff meeting we've had a member of the management team stand up and play their song and their story. So it's been brilliant, really. Like we've had Paul Sturgeon tell his, which is he could write a book. He could write a book as well. And Freddie Michalak, who's equally, Freddie Michalak's done more in terms of rugby and life than most people would do in a full lifetime. He's only just turned 40. So his was an amazing story. So, but what I found really, really enjoyable is the players doing it as well. So you've had Henry Chavonsi. I asked for a volunteer and he straight away put his hand up. I thought, great leadership. So I put his hand up and he said, I'll do it. So he told his story. And then we've had Ibrahim Diallo, Sedat Gomasa, Nolan Legare, Max. And it's fascinating for me. And I'm sure it is for everyone, because I position myself at the front of the room as, so they're watching the screen and Max is talking and I'm watching them. And they're really engaged. And it's only 10 minutes, but it's such a good 10 minutes of the week. And I said to the players, listen, I know with the pressure of games, we could easily not have those 10 minutes, but I think it's so important we get to know each other. And so that's been, it's been a really, really good thing. We had a couple of socials. So one with the players, one with players and partners and friends or whatever. We've got another one planned. We've set up a supporters bus to take them to the game to make sure that they can sort of socially interact. The design of Racing's training centre is actually very conducive to good conversation. So where the meeting room, the sort of lunch room, and the office space where the staff sit is all in the same space, basically. So there's just people bouncing, those corridor conversations. People just I think what there was some guy said to me, accidental conversations, but they happen all the time because everyone's just sort of in and amongst each other. The gym is designed better now, so we can do walkthroughs. The pitch is right next door to the gym. So there's a lot of, and the change room's just one open plan changing room, where sometimes in rugby environments, the change room is split into two, or you've got a younger and an older changing room, or, so just little things like that. They're just helpful to build and get to know each other. And
it's clearly striking a chord. It's paying off. The players are responding, and the staff members are responding as well to it.
Yeah, I think the staff, there's a mixture of, I don't say 75%, 80% existing staff from last year, and then maybe 25% new. So it's taking those staff with us and making sure we don't ride over what's been done last year, but also build on it, but also not be afraid to make changes. And I think they've all been open-minded to do that. But I think people forget when you're a head coach of a team, you're actually responsible you're responsible for your management team and your playing group as well. So it's a combination of 45 senior players, 35 espoirs, and probably 35 management. and then you've got the layers above you, your presidents and your owners, and then you've got all the sort of commercial team, media department, logistics people surrounding it all. So it's a lot of names to learn, and it's a lot of little conversations to have.
When you mentioned the owners and the presidents and all that, do they take an interest in the teams that you pick, and
I've tried to. So Lauren, who's become the president, I've tried to involve Lauren in everything where possible, simply because it makes sense to me, because he's coached the team for the last 10 years and he knows the players better than me anyway, and he knows the top 14 better than me, and I want his opinion. Truth be told, I want his opinion to see what he thinks about this, and this. Now, he's not going to dictate to me, and he seems to have embraced his change in role from head coach to president very well. I mean, I'm sure I don't know if he does want to coach again, or whether he's missing coaching, but he's been nothing but supportive. Jackie, the owner, I've not seen a huge amount of him. He's been on holiday, but I'm sure he'll be there on Saturday. But again, he is the type of owner that you want, someone who's supportive. He's got very good values in terms of family values, believes in family first. He's not in every meeting like telling me what to do, but he's supportive from afar, which is great.
That's interesting about Lauren, because, in a corporate sense, it'd be like the CEO becoming the chairman of the board, and a new CEO comes in, and the last thing you want is people kind of still turning to the old guy saying,
well, yeah, or if you're in his position, I don't know, someone comes into PwC and changes everything you did and go, God, this is so much better, or this is different, or we needed a change from Feargal, and you're sat there thinking, well, I thought it was okay under me.
No, but it sounds like he's, in fairness to him, he's embraced it really well.
He's
there for you if you need him, but not going to interfere in the.
Yeah.
So the game is coming up, the first game. I mean, first of all, the arena, talk about it, because on television it looks spectacular. I haven't been there myself yet, but it just looks out of this world. But the fact that you don't train there, is that a disadvantage to the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, we are going there for the captain's run on Friday, but you're right, we're not there very often. But it's not dissimilar from, I guess, playing at the Aviva, in that we don't. Leinster wouldn't often train at the Aviva, but a lot of the Irish lads who play for Ireland feel like the Aviva's their second home. But the Defence Arena it's very unique in terms of rugby environment. So guaranteed 22 degrees, guaranteed no wind, guaranteed no rain. Now, it's more than 20 degrees in Paris, and it's actually rained. I don't know if it's been like in Dublin, but it's been raining a lot in France recently.
And the pitch, Stuart? The pitch?
It's an Astro pitch. So it's a good pitch. And it's filled by 3/4, and at the far end is just a massive screen. They have like a light show before the game. Half time comes more light show. After the game, they put bars on the pitch, and the pitch becomes like a bodyguard, I think they call it, like a post-match event.
Wow.
Pitch. So they're not short of entertainment. In terms of does home field advantage count? So I've got this great Kansas City Chiefs video that I've used in the past. I'll probably use it again with. I've used it with the marketing department of Racing to show them. We also did a video with England on England's identity. So I've shown both videos and said, listen, I think there's something we can do on identity, and I think there's something we can do on home field advantage, because speaking to the players and the former players and the current players, often the opposition fan bring a fair few numbers because out of interest, right? We'll go to the Defence Arena.
Yeah,
they create a strong vibe, but in favour of the opposition in the crowd, and obviously the Racing fans need to match that and beat that. Whereas when you go to La Rochelle, you maybe, I don't know, it feels like there's maybe only space for, no matter how many supporters you want to bring, there's only space for there's that many season ticket holders. So I think players from opposition teams look forward to going to the Defence Arena to play.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want that, do you? You want you don't look forward to it. I remember speaking to a coach from Newcastle Falcons, and I said, "Oh, so when you plan on your game?" He said, "Oh, Friday night." He said, "Friday night. Hopefully, it's raining. It's up in Newcastle, and no one wants to play." So yeah, it's a unique environment. We need to make home advantage count, but as to what it feels like for me, I'll tell you in the next episode.
But it's interesting, Stuart, because if I think of the real French citadels, you think of Perpignan, where you went and won. You think of La Rochelle. You think of Toulouse, where the fans, make noise the whole time. Yeah. I read a stat that Racing only have about 1,000 season ticket holders. So it seems to be, is it a transient attendance that are kind of coming along to be entertained?
Yeah, I think it is, but I think they are attracted to. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do in Paris, and there's a lot of alternatives, but they are attracted to a style of rugby and a winning team. So I think that that's the priority for me. Concentrate on that. We can concentrate on 101 other things, but for me, it's concentrate on that and build the performances. And it's build it and they will come type scenario, isn't it? But when you look back to like the European Cup finals that they've been in, the top 14 final back in 2016, there's plenty of people turned out to support them. I mean, I'd say, in the tens of thousands in the stadium on both occasions, like the top 14 final and certainly the game in Bilbao.
Yeah. And Bordeaux, where your assessment of them kind of looking.
They've got a new coaching team as well. Yannick Bruce come from the Sharks in South Africa, and Noel McNamara from Leinster. He's come with him. So, so I think in the top 14, bar three head coaches, there are 11 new head coaches.
Wow.
So
that's almost like Premiership.
Obviously, I'm one of them, but how that trying to predict how teams will play and prepare, it's quite difficult. You've got a sort of rough idea. You can watch preseason games, but I think if Bordeaux watched our Brive game, then we haven't given too much of the game away. Hopefully that's going to stand to our favour. My master plan of playing badly against Brive.
So, it's a home game, and statistically in France, the home team tends to do well. You want to win, but you want to, by the sense of it, you want a Perpignan-like performance.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you're always striving for as a coach. You're just striving for translation of what you're doing training onto the playing field, and then that the rugby gods sometimes do or don't, go your way, and there might be whatever bounce of the ball, something might happen, but if you've got a good squad of players and they've worked hard and trained hard and they apply what you've done in training into the game, you should have a better than even chance of winning. So that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
And then you've Pau in the second game away.
Goes away. So again, looking for that consistency, emotional consistency of like not to be up for the home game and like, not as much for the away game. And then Perpignan at home. After in round 3, and then we get a break when the World Cup starts. So I've got a week. I've given the players everyone a week off, and then we have a couple of training weeks, another week off, and then the lead up into, because after that week off, I don't think there's another break until end of March. There's a game every weekend. I think we're talking must be 20 odd weekends in a row.
So the next time we speak in about a month's time, you'll have 3 games under your belt. You'll be in the middle of starting a camp. Yeah. You, again, I'll ask you, success looks like just consistent performances, continuing that growth.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I feel we're making progress, and I think the enthusiasm momentum's good. I think every coach would say that in preseason. So what often happens is making sure we have consistency once the initial excitement of the season started, and we're into it a bit more. And obviously there's been perhaps wins and losses as well to account for. And it's making sure we stay even within that period, not like this roller coaster of emotion. For me personally, I think there's I think I talked about the capacity, being at capacity, and with the multiple challenges getting thrown as the number one and everything else, I'd like to still be within capacity where possible.
Yes.
I feel like I'm like just about I've got enough on my plate just to keep my head above water at the moment. Do the job well, but yeah, it'd be helpful if there was a good translation into the games. That'd be definitely helpful. If not, then obviously I've got to find other ways to improve the team. Because it's the top 14 is a marathon. I was looking at the stats the other day. Like the team that wins the competition generally loses between 7 to 10 games, or 7, 8, 9 games. That's the team that wins. So the team that comes third or fourth or fifth or sixth, they might lose 10 or 11 games. Now I can't actually compute that in my mind, because at Leinster there'd be an increst if we lost one game. Never mind, lost 10 games this season. So I'm sort of steeling myself for if that happens, but I'm also optimistically thinking it's not gonna.
So you could have had a successful season even if you lose the same number of games you lost with Leinster over 4 seasons.
Well, yeah, because you could make the playoffs and you could win the playoffs and you could win the top 14. I mean, it's happened before. I mean, remember Leinster, what we beat Montpellier in Europe 89 something at the RDS, and Montpellier went to win the top 14. That was 2 years ago.
The last question for I know the rugby people who are watching as well as the leadership people, but just a quick kind of assessment from you on the pre-World Cup stuff that's happened. Ntamack is out. Cyril Bailly looks like he may be struggling. Johnny's been wrapped in cotton wool until the first game. Owen Farrell gets cleared to play back this Saturday.
I mean, the profile of the sport is going to go through the roof. It already is getting close to going through the roof already, and we've already started the tournament. I mean, Ntamack getting injured in France, it's like there's a day of mourning over here, because now they're debating, should it be Ramos, should it be Jalibert or Hastoy? So yeah, and they've still got 2 warm games to go. I think they've got Fiji to come. Everyone in France has now got the fingers crossed that like there's nothing else. And so Ireland play England, and those are the games that are to come. So the World Cup takes on a life of its own when it actually starts as well. Obviously, my experience in 2015, and people tend not to remember this period. Ironically,
yes.
And if you said, "Well, who were the warm-up games that England or Ireland played in 2015?" You're probably like, "Well, I can remember maybe one." But
you beat us,
yeah. I mean, England beat Ireland, but no one remembers that. But yeah, but it feels like the profile of the World Cup is just getting bigger every World Cup cycle, isn't it? And it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be great in for the country of France in that it's obviously spread all over the country, but obviously it'll all gravitate towards Paris at the end. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the tier 2 nations are going to have part to play.
Yeah.
I think the quality of the coaching staff in some of them, and also this regulation that's allowed players to play for their original country of birth to come back. So the strength of those tier 2 countries will make it challenging for a lot of tier 1 teams. So I think there'll be more. It'll be a leveler playing field, and all it takes is 1 or 2 injuries to key players for certain teams, and that'll level it out even more.
I think that Wales, Australia, Fiji, Georgia group could be really interesting.
I mean, you look how strong Georgia were against Wales when they beat them, and that's just one of the teams. There'd be very few pushovers. I fear a bit for Chile. I'm a bit more nervous for Chile, having played them with Leinster, but hopefully they can be competitive. But yeah, the rest of them, I think it's going to be tough.
Well, anyway, good luck, Stuart, for the upcoming 3 games, and we talk again in a month's time.
Yeah, thanks, Feargal.
Cheers.
Cheers.